up in just a second here. It's spinning.
Okay, I'm going to open the Common Council meeting on August 10th at 7 p.m. Could we please stand for the pledge of allegiance and the flag is ready over here.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Carol, can you please start off with the roll call?
Steve Beardsley. Is he online? Okay. Megan Sheets, present. Michael Bright,
Present.
Clarence Worthen,
Present.
Grant Fuller,
Present.
Eric Woods,
Present.
Joe Palmer.
Present.
Next on the agenda are the minutes from July 27th, the regular meeting of the Common Council. Is there any discussion or comments, or would someone like to make a motion to pass these minutes?
Make a motion. Approve. I'll second.
Is that Mike?
Yes.
Megan Sheets,
Aye.
Mike Bright, Clarence Worthen,
Aye.
Grant Fuller,
Aye.
Joe Palmer,
Aye.
Eric Woods.
Aye.
Okay, did we have any public comments tonight? I think, Keelan, can you see if they're on the? Nothing, okay. We'll move on then to the next thing on the agenda, which is ordinance 20-13, and this is second reading. I will go ahead and have a motion made, a first and a second, and then I'm going to have Nick Kyle present some information for us.
I'll make a motion to pass ordinance 20-13. Second.
Roll call, please.
Steve Beardsley, Megan Sheets,
Aye. Yes. Oh, okay, never mind. We have to discuss it first, right? Okay, sorry, Nick.
So you want to hear from me now?
Yeah, I'm ready to hear from you.
We will have a public hearing. The notices are going out, Todd, I believe, today. Notices to out-of-town customers have to be mailed. It's also been published this week. The public hearing will be held 2 weeks from tonight here. While we were putting the notice together, we did notice there was a scrivener's error, which I think, has that now been distributed, Carol, or?
yes, I have emailed it to everyone.
Okay. It essentially, in this very last subsection C before the severability provision, there's one cross-reference that was omitted. Cross-reference to 52.02A2. And so we'd like you to amend the ordinance to add that additional cross-reference. That is in the notice, so it's been corrected before the notices went out. But certainly before we got the ordinance, that we would want that changed to be made. Other than that, I believe you've heard reports last time from the engineer and financial advisor on how the financing will work. They will also be here in 2 weeks for a public hearing. I can answer questions to the extent of further questions tonight, but this is not the final word on this ordinance. That's in 2 weeks.
Well, so I'm going to look to you for advice. Now, since we've already made the motion, how do you want us to do that?
That motion and second could be withdrawn and then remade so that the motion is to approve the water rates ordinance as amended, or they can simply amend their motion and amend the second to incorporate that.
Clarence, you pulled your second? And I'll make a motion to cancel mine.
Okay, so those two rescinded their motion, so you want to make,
And I'll make a motion that we pass 2013 with the amendments.
Well, you want to make a motion first to amend the ordinance and then vote on that. And then make a motion to pass the ordinance as amended.
so right now, we're just making the motion for the amendment.
Yeah.
For the amendment.
Okay. Carol.
Megan Sheets. Mike Wright.
Aye.
Clarence Worthing.
Aye.
Grant Fuller.
Aye.
Joe Palmer.
Aye.
Eric Woods.
Aye. Now I'll make a motion to pass ordinance 2013 as amended. Second.
Roll call, please, Carol.
Megan Sheets.
Aye.
Mike Wright.
Aye.
Clarence Worthing.
Aye.
Grant Fuller.
Aye.
Joe Palmer.
Aye.
Eric Woods.
Aye.
Ordinance 20-13 passes on second reading as amended. Did anybody else have anything to say to you, Todd, or anything? Next on the agenda is ordinance 20-14. It's on first reading. I would entertain a motion to read by title only.
So moved. So second.
Eric and Brent. Roll call, please.
Megan Sheets.
Aye.
Mike Wright.
Aye.
Clarence Worthing.
Aye.
Grant Fuller.
Aye.
Joe Palmer.
Aye.
Eric Woods.
Aye.
Read that by title only.
Ordinance number 20-14, an ordinance annexing certain territory to the city of Frankfort, Indiana, placing the same within the corporate boundaries thereof, and making the same a part of the city of Frankfort, Indiana, the Interstate 65.
Would anyone like to make a motion to pass this in one discussion after the motions are made?
I make a motion that we pass.
On first reading.
First reading.
I'll second.
I think he's Mike.
Okay, is there any discussion or any questions? I think I'm gonna have Nick go ahead and give a presentation.
Certainly, and can answer any questions that you may have. You have lots of information that's been shared with you over the course of the last few days. We have come through 6 public informational sessions over the course of the last 3 weeks. They've been fairly well attended. I thought they were very well received. And I think the city gathered a lot of useful information and made changes to the annexation that was being considered and discussed along the way as a result of feedback during the course of those meetings. We now have reached the point where we are at kind of the first step in an annexation. I sent you all, I think it was this morning, an Excel spreadsheet, which is a timeline, that kind of lays out everything that has to happen for annexation. I'm not going to go into great detail about all of those steps, but I do want to tell you what the next step would be, or the next critical steps are after tonight. Tonight, I'm going to ask you to pass the ordinance on first reading, and then I'm going to come back up here in a few moments, and I'm going to ask you to adopt a resolution which will establish the fiscal plan for the annexation, which essentially sets forth a bunch of information required by statute, the sort of sources and uses of funds that will be necessary to provide services out there. And then it has lots and lots and lots of data concerning individual parcels in the annexation territory and financial impacts. That all is in the fiscal plan and will be part of the resolution. And we have folks here from the Marine Financial Group when that resolution comes up, that if there are questions about that, we can cover that. So those are the first 2 steps that we're going to do tonight. During the course of the next week, we will send a notice out to every property owner that's in the annexation territory. We will also send a different notice to property owners who abut the annexation territory because they're across the road from it. So there are a lot of notices that have to go out. We are shooting to have those notices out by a week from today. And those notices are of a public hearing, and that's the next step for you all, which we are tentatively scheduling for October 26th, 2020, again, right in this room. And then we have to wait after that public hearing before we can take final action on the ordinance. That will take place between 30 and 60 days after the public hearing. That then begins what we call the remonstrance period, a time period when if sufficient landowners gather signatures, there could be a remonstrance filed. If that period passes and there is no remonstrance filed, then the annexation becomes final. The ordinance before you includes a 3-year delay of the effective date of the annexation. So if everything went according to Hoyle, we are looking at that remonstrance period expiring sometime the last week of March 2021. That would mean the ordinance would not take effect and the territory would be in the city sometime the last week of March 2024. Non-capital services would then begin by March of 2025, and capital services would begin by March of 2027. In addition to the 3-year delay of the annexation, there's layered on top of that an abatement of the municipal. The first assessment date where territory is in the city is at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025. The first year that taxes are going to be due would be the spring assessment in 2026. That assessment, they would only pay 25% of the city rate. Then in 2027, they would pay 50% of the city rate. And in 2028, they would pay 75% of the city rate. And in 2029 would be the first year that they would pay the full city rate. By statute, property that is assessed as agricultural land is exempt from the city tax rate for as long as it is used for agricultural purposes. And the zoning cannot change without the consent of the affected property owner. So those are both statutory requirements that are also embodied in the terms of the ordinance. We put them in the ordinance because there had been some concern expressed at some of the informational meetings about how agricultural land would be dealt with. And so we concluded, let's just put the law in the ordinance, and then we will send a copy of this ordinance with the notice so that they don't need to go digging around looking for it or try to find it themselves. We're going to give them a copy of the ordinance, they can look for themselves and see where it is. I'm happy to answer further questions about the process, but that's the ordinance and the sort of snapshot of what we've got next and what we have to do now.
Does anyone have any questions for Nick tonight?
Just one question on page 2 of the bottom, your lifestyle exemptions.
Yes.
Owners of property included in the annexation territory are hereby exempt from the requirements and restrictions listed under Frankfort City Code, livestock in the city, tree trimming requirements, unlawful burning. Am I reading that?
You are, and I am anticipating this. We've had a conversation with some of the county commissioners. The intention of this provision, and it may not be perfect yet, and again, we're at the beginning of the process. The intention of this provision is not to impose an obligation on them that is not already on them. And so we have committed to work with the county to make certain, for instance, there is a county prohibition on open burning. We want to make sure that by exempting them from our provision, that they can't do something that they couldn't do currently. So that I am expecting before we come back, it may be before the public hearing, I am expecting that provision will be fine-tuned.
Do you have any other questions? Les, did you have anything for us on this? Thank you, Dan. We've got a first and a second to pass this on first reading. We're ready for roll call vote.
Megan Sheets. Aye. Mike Bright.
Aye.
Clarence Worthen.
Aye.
Grant Fuller.
Aye.
Eric Woods.
Aye.
Joe Palmer.
Aye.
Ordinance 20-14 passes on first reading. Next on the agenda is resolution 20-13. Do you want to read that title for us, please?
Adopting a fiscal plan and definite policy for the annexation of property contiguous to the city of Frankfort, Indiana, pursuant to ordinance number 20-14, the Interstate 65 annexation.
Okay, tonight we have Nick is here as well as Jerry and Mickey from Reedy Financial to speak with us on that.
Certainly, I'll give you a brief synopsis of the 400-page document that's attached. In essence, what this document does is it lays out by department the anticipated costs of extending services of each of those departments to the annexation territory by the date that we are required to have those services extended. It also provides what the source of funding is to do that extension. You will see if you page back far enough through the document, it is essentially a wash. There is enough revenue coming in over the course of the abatement period that by the end of it, it is cash flowing. It also has lots of information on individual parcels concerning the assessed value, various deductions that they may have, the taxable value of that property, what their current tax bill is, what their anticipated tax bill will be after the full abatement has rolled off, showing the effect of the tax rate. I think all of the large commercial property each has its own calculation shown, and I think there's an exemplar of a residential property that's in there. Then there's also effect on other units of government. You know, when we're changing municipal levies, that has ripple effects across other taxing units. Those effects are calculated and shown as well. You know, we can get into as much detail as you want, and as I said, the brains behind the calculation are here to my left, so we're happy to do whatever is your pleasure. But we do need to adopt it tonight if we're going to keep with the schedule that I gave you earlier.
Carol does have a copy of the fiscal plan. It's going to be in her office if anybody wants to see it. We didn't go ahead and run copies for everyone. We knew that it was 400 pages. So.
We did provide an electronic copy, yes.
And it would be my hope, we do have an obligation, and this obligation came about years ago in the code, but it came out before all of this additional information that produces 400 pages of paper. We've got an obligation that anybody in the land that's a landowner in the territory can come in and ask for a copy and be given it immediately. Back in the day when it used to be provided, the fiscal plan was about 25, 30 pages long. What I'm going to suggest we do is we make that available and post it online so that we tell landowners, here's where you can immediately get a copy of the full fiscal plan. Then they can print the pages they want. We don't have to charge whatever it is you charge for copying, and it will just be easier for them.
Okay, we can work on that. Jerry and Vicki, did you have anything that you wanted to talk about?
They pretty much covered it. Yeah, once you guys do look through it, definitely let us know if you have any questions. Because it is a lot of information. A lot of the pages are the individual tax bill analysis of each property, but there is a lot of information that affects the last units as well. Yeah, definitely. If you guys have any questions, let us know.
Did anybody have any questions for them? Are we ready to go ahead and have a motion made?
Make a motion to pass resolution number 20-13.
please, Carol.
Megan Sheets. Mike Wright.
Aye.
Clarence Worthen.
Aye.
Grant Fuller.
Aye.
Eric Woods.
Aye.
Joe Palmer.
Aye.
Resolution 20-13 passes. Next on the agenda, oh, you leaving?
Well, unless you need me for,
I think we're good. You say,
thanks.
Andrew, aye.
good luck with that. Next on the agenda is resolution 20-14. It's a resolution expressing interest in purchasing real estate and appointing appraisers. Scott, did you want to talk about this a little bit, or? So concerning the new police department and a location that we are going to ask for appraisals for. 14, yeah, we have 14.
So it's 14, is that the one on 28?
Yes,
14 to 460 West Walnut.
Yeah.
460 is, yeah,
The first one is, West
CD.
Walnut Street.
CDS.
Yeah, there's, I think there's two resolutions tonight. One that the mayor and I, this is property that we've looked at here in the last 2 weeks. I believe it's resolution 15. We're asking both of these properties to at least be approved. That way we can go with the priority, which would be the one that's not being discussed right now, the next resolution. Doing appraisals on those that property first, and if that property were to fall through, continue with a second appraisal on the CDS property.
So we are still considering the CBS building along with some property out by that is 7.7.
There's 7.7 acres have been on the market a little bit, but there was some discussion about the airport being too far out, CBS being potentially something that may not happen, that we needed a location that we found this one. It's been talked about since the beginning, I would say, since we started this process about 3.5 years ago, but really never got a good look until the mayor and I talked about it, and I tried to send a message out for the council to take a look.
Currently, we have these two properties, and I still haven't ruled out the airport yet, but I think these are probably the top two that we're looking at right now. We will need appraisals on these, so. Would anyone like to make a motion to pass resolution 20-14?
I'll make a motion to pass, resolution 20-14.
I'll second.
Roll call, please, Carol.
Megan Sheets. Mike Wright.
Aye.
Clarence Worthen.
Aye.
Grant Fuller.
Aye.
Eric Woods.
Aye.
Joe Palmer.
Aye.
Resolution 20-14 passes. Next on the agenda is resolution 20-15. It's a resolution expressing interest in purchasing real estate and appointing appraisers.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to pass resolution 2015.
Second.
Roll call, please, Carol.
Megan Sheets. Mike Wright.
Aye.
Clarence Worthen.
Aye.
Grant Fuller.
Aye.
Eric Woods.
Aye.
Joe Palmer.
Aye.
Resolution 20-15 passes. Tonight, under old business, we have two different things listed. We have the regional economic development, which Shane Sheridan's here, and also the budget. I think we're going to switch this a little bit and have Shane go ahead and come up and talk to us about that regional economic development.
All right, I'll come up with all my witness. Share. Hi, Ken. Aaron.
One day closer to King Jesus taking over, praise God, amen. Hey, thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about economic development regionally. We've been part of the North Central Indiana Regional Partnership for somewhere around 12, 13, 14 years, actually since about 2007, so about 13 years. We've been part of the regional partnership. Actually, before that, we were a part of the partnership, but not necessarily officially, because the partnership was kind of loosely put together with 6 counties.
those counties being Fulton, Howard, Cass, Tipton, and Clinton County, and I might be missing one, but I think those are the ones. Oh, Miami. So as we looked at regions, there was really no region in the Lafayette. Most people say, well, why aren't you in the Lafayette region? At that time, there was really no region in the Lafayette, so we had adopted, because we were actually part of the Ivy Tech region in Kokomo at that time, we decided to move towards that region when Gina Sheets was the executive director as economic development director. And so we decided to go with Howard County, and we were glad that we did because they were on the forefront of putting together a comprehensive economic development strategy, in which an economic development strategy has to be in place in order for us to be able to pursue any type of economic development grants through the Economic Development Association, through the federal government. I am very pleased to let you know that the sheet that I just passed out, the one pager, kind of gives you a breakdown of some of the things that have been ongoing. 2015 is when the North Central Indiana Regional Partnership actually created its SEDS, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy that we are now a part of. And since that time, there's been over $6 million awarded in our region. That's a 5-year total. As you can see the breakdown, where Clinton County has received just over $1 million, but that does not include something that just recently happened that we're very excited about and will be able to share hopefully very soon. We're waiting for some press releases to come from EDA, and we hope to be able to share that with the public here very soon, but it's exciting news. It will be the largest grant that our region has received, and we're excited about that. It's also the largest grant that Clinton County has received, and actually the only grant that Clinton County has ever received from EDA. The only reason that we could receive that grant, which is going to be the wastewater infrastructure project at 65, is because of the SEDS, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy that we're part of. So that's a little bit of an update on that. When it comes to Frankfurt, we have been, Stephen Ray has been involved with the community crossings. He has helped Jason with the grants for the community crossing grants this last year to receive dollars for that. We've had over $600,000 awarded in those grants in the last couple of years, and then Kirkland received $600,000 this year from the OGRA grant. So we have seen some pretty significant impact from our regional partnership, and how it breaks down at 77 cents per constituent throughout the every year, and that's based upon just under 34,000 county members, and so that's how it's broken down. So we asked, the county pays 13,000 and the city pays 13,000. Clarence actually is part of the county or the council as a representation of the city council on the North Central Indiana Regional Partnership. So that's my update. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jan. Do you have any questions? This is something that we currently have in our budget through our heading of $13,000 for the year. And we just wanted you to come and talk to us a little bit about it as we plan for our 2020.
And Stephen had planned to be here, but I told him the weather was so bad that it's an hour drive for him. And I just said, you know what? I think I'll take care of it. Just stay home.
Did I answer any questions? Clarence, do you have anything to say?
No, I'm happy to remember that.
Of course, things have changed quite drastically with meetings. We've had virtual meetings, but we've also we had our last meeting in person held at Kokomo at the Inventrek, but it was scarcely attended, unfortunately, because folks just, again, not getting out. So we'll go back to a virtual meeting next time.
Okay. Thank you, Jan. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have the 2021 budget discussions. Desi, will you bring your have my book, I don't know if anybody needs to check anything. One of the things that was in question was the regional economic development. 13,000, if we want to keep that in the budget or not. That looks like it's very beneficial for us, right? Okay. So Jerry and Nikki, let's go ahead and read that. Also, it was brought to my attention that under the attorney's budget, maybe there was a couple zeros left off. Just a couple.
Short advantage.
Oh, well, not the last guys. It might be ours, but we're honest. Under the contracted legal services, at 20,000 this year. For some reason, they got put in the book as 200, and I think that needs to be changed to 20,000. And I believe, was that the only thing, Les, that you saw on yours? Also, I asked Caitlin to give us any changes that she saw as
So I went through our 2020 salary ordinances and all the amendments that were made this year. I only found two things that I don't know if I'm doing it wrong or if it is wrong on here. The supervisor in the parks, the working supervisor in the parks department, so the second in command, and then the second in command at the street department, I believe. They make the same amount. Our ordinance says they made 1,798 this year. And then the total that you guys have for the adopted 2020 budget is, if you divide that by 26, it equals like 1,787. So those just need to go up by about $200 a piece. Other than that, all of them check out just fine.
okay, that's good. Okay.
Streets foreman, I believe, and then the parks supervisor.
Because I don't believe there's been any changes made either one of them throughout this year.
No, there hasn't.
This must be something like calculation.
Yeah.
I'm gonna probably have Jerry or maybe talk to you as well. I think each one of you have the summary sheet. Right. Okay. As far as our surplus or deficit in each one of our funds, and then also our year-end cash projected for 2021. So Jerry, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's the same summary sheet that we went over a couple of weeks ago. We met for the all-day meeting. We incorporated all the updates that were discussed during that meeting. So real quick, to update you guys on this, you can see the general fund, the first fund there has a surplus now, a little over 95,000 MBH. And before I guess get into all of this stuff, you can see that there are some funds that have larger surpluses. For the time being, we didn't move any line items around. We left them the way they are currently. We can definitely shift stuff around because once we get to this next fund, MBH will see that there is a deficit. But we can, there's some fund flexibility within the fund, so we'll be able to move stuff around and shift revenue from general to MBH to balance that out. But until we got feedback from you guys, we didn't want to just, start making changes to line items within funds. So the next fund there, the MBH fund, there is a deficit currently, kind of a little over 200,000. Once again, once we shift stuff around, we'll be able to shift more property taxes to that fund to be able to balance it out. MBH restricted, as discussed previously, there's a budget that's not being spent this year that's going to be cash on hand, be able to be spent next year. So yes, there is a deficit budget-wise for just 2021 of 225,000, but the majority of that budget this year is not going to be spent because of the timing of the projects on hand. So a lot of that money is going to be spent next year. LRS fund, small deficit, a little under 5,000. It's got plenty of cash in there, mainly used for paving projects. Sanitation, same, small deficit. It has cash on hand as well to sustain that. Public safety, based off of the changes during our meeting, there is a surplus there. This is a fund where we could shift more police or fire from the general fund to this fund, and then be able to shift revenue from general to MVH to help it. Same with CCD and King Fire, both of these, after the adjustments, both have surpluses. Once again, we can shift stuff around because right now MVH is the one that needs a little help this year. And then LED, there is a deficit there. There is cash on hand there as well. Collectively, without counting MVH restricted, LRS, and the sanitation fund, the other funds, general fund, MVH, the public safety, CCD, King Fire, and LED, collectively the surplus deficit there. After we make the change for the attorney's budget, we're looking at a deficit of right around 66,000, which we have built in different aspects into the plan that are extremely conservative in my opinion. We're definitely, especially with the general fund, assuming 100% of the budget is being spent. Historically, you guys don't spend 100% of your budget. And so really ultimately it comes down to where would you guys like to shift things around as far as where, or would you like to make further cuts?
Part of that and the MVH restricted is due to the Washington Avenue Phase 2 this year.
Yes.
There's 237,000 that we're not going to use.
Yes.
So that's going to help a lot on that balancing the budget for next year because we're not going to use this moving forward. And the cash value or the year-end cash for each one of those funds, we're okay. It's just balancing that for next year for the revenues versus our expenditures. MVH, Jerry and I have talked about that. I think at some point we probably are going to have to look at it, see what we're going to do differently.
Yeah, I would, especially with the situation we're in right now, and the state's projections for MVH distributions are drastically down. So that contributes a lot to this deficit in MVH. It does get property tax levy. It's part of the maximum levy. So by shifting expenditures away from general to some of these other funds that have surpluses, we would ultimately be building the surplus in general. Well, then we could take property tax levy from the general and put it in MVH to balance it out. I would highly recommend to get MVH fund since it is a fund, one of your major operating funds, to definitely balance that out as much as possible. So if you would decide to spend down a little bit of cash, my recommendation would be one of the ones on one of the four on the far right, just because those are mainly capital related funds. You don't operate out of them as much, especially the lit public safety, CCD, and King Fire. Lit public safety has a nice cash balance in it currently, but I would definitely want to shift things around to help out the MVH fund since that is a major operating fund, meaning you pay a lot of personal services out of that fund, so we want to make sure that the funding is there. But like I said, we didn't want to shift anything around right now. We can give our recommendation and send out another revised budget book and send out a summary page of what we actually moved around like that. It's completely up to you guys.
Does anybody have any ideas on what they're thinking?
I guess I don't sit in here right now, but if they're giving us the total, suggesting we take that to a zero instead of a deficit, I'm sure we could probably do that by the next meeting.
And I agree with Jerry on the fact that we could move out of city general and to public safety lit, because as you see, the year-end cash next year is going to be 737,000. So you're going to have the cash available to move some of those expenditures out of city general.
Yeah, and
shift
even
the levy around, but we're going to be on.
And even on top of that, I mean, with the way local public safety is, that it's, the way the budget is with projected revenues for 2021, right now it's building cash by 61,000. We don't necessarily have to move more over there where we spend out cash, but we could still, shift over roughly 60 grand over there, and that fund is still not spending down cash, correct? Which would just be police or fire out of, general fund that would be shifted to the local public safety.
Is that true as well with the lead? Yeah, I mean, do you think we would be, what would you be doing there? Moving some of the expenses out of there, or?
Yes, you could do that. There's so much flexibility that we can move stuff around. That's why collectively over the general fund, MVH, lead, CCD, Cume Fire, and LED, that collective deficit right now after the adjustment for the attorney's department is roughly 67,000. I mean, so really, if you let us know, oh, we would rather spend some down a little bit of cash in this area, we can shift stuff around. So, that's if you didn't make any further cuts. If you wanted to make further cuts, we could make sure we balance every single fund out. But there is so much fund flexibility between them that we would be able to shift the line items around.
Any questions for Jerry or Mickey? My preference would be that we go ahead and work on moving some of these different things from one budget to the other to get it as balanced as we can. And we'll still have the cash reserves as well.
Yeah, the number that I would really focus on if you do want to cut more would probably be 67,000. Would be my recommendation there. MVH restricted, it kind of is what it is since we're not spending in LRS and sanitation. There's not a whole lot that we can do with those two funds, but there's a very small spending on cash there. But
do you think we can keep that 67,000 where it is and we'd still be okay?
Oh yeah, you guys.
Our cash balances.
Yeah, you would be fine, especially with some of the conservative aspects we have in the plan as well. I think you would definitely be fine if you left it.
Do you mind if I say something? No. In this budget book, the extra raises that are in question are included in that, so just keep that in mind.
Is that right? So you have the extra.
Yes.
Okay.
Which was, Caitlin, do you?
Yeah, she not tell us. Employees are included.
Since she spent a lot of spending.
One of them would be the other admin assistant in the building inspector's office. However, we did discuss last time that that was a normal move that we've done with several other positions. So I think that one was left more solid than the rest. Another one was the park superintendent. I believe it was a $3,000 raise on top of the normal raise.
Yes, that's what I have, 3,000.
And then I think the only other one was in the building inspector's office, and it was the actual building inspector's position, and it was like an extra $10,000 raise.
Would you repeat that?
The building inspector, the actual building inspector, underneath Dawn, it was, I believe it was about a $10,000 raise.
And you're saying those additions are reflected in the summary sheet in these figures?
Yeah, it's in what I just looked over, the third draft of the budget. They're in there.
Yeah, so, yeah, it is.
What did you have for the building inspector? You have that?
It's a 22% increase. That's 51,924. Yeah.
There should have been one for code enforcement, or
the police department bringing them?
That wasn't necessarily, a raise, that was, they're getting rid of, if I'm correct, Scott, they're getting rid of their part-time, position money, and they're just putting that on to, because they're equal, neither one of them is in charge of the other, and they perform the same job duties.
So you're just doing away with the part-time?
Yeah, and shifting that money over.
Yes. But technically, it's a raise for the position.
There's a senior code enforcement officer and I guess a junior, but they do the same thing. They split the city in half. And their workload right now doesn't require a part-time.
So basically you restructured that department.
I think when they were under the building inspector, they did have more of a senior position who made sure that the two part-time positions that we had at the time, she was in charge of them, so that kind of just carried over when it got moved over to the police department, but now they're all under Jim Skinner. He's in charge of them, so they just work for him and perform the same job duties.
So when did we set those two back? Two code enforcement.
Just a moment.
That's ordered, I can't remember what's ordered.
Is that the,
42,746. No, that's wrong.
well,
Is it that 80, it's 81?
she's got a
Yeah, so it's 40,574.
40,574. I'm trying to see where it is on the budget.
It's under the police department.
Yeah, I know, please, that's not right.
The line item is where you find the code enforcement officer.
You combined it,
Yeah, so it's
that's why, okay, I thought that didn't look right.
81, 148 is the total.
Okay. Put both positions in. Okay, 81, 148. So if you just stop where they would just because enforcement officers, then you just have two of the very same positions, so for the salary ordinance, you were just gonna.
Yeah, we turned in 17,000. I think our increase was between 2 and 3 to get it equal. We didn't use that rest of that 17,000. But
So 17,000 for the first.
part-time was 17.
Yes,
I got that. The raise, the code enforcement, let's say $3 grand.
okay, so you're saying you have 14,000.
That we turned back.
So that you have both your code enforcement officers at the same time.
Your maintenance guy, you're bringing him up $2 grand.
2 grand.
Anybody have any thoughts on that?
The only issue I have is given the gentleman at the building inspector a $10,000 raise. I don't want to discredit the work that he's done. I heard he's done a really good job, but he hasn't been there very long and he hasn't got a certification yet. And for me, that's hard to give somebody that amount of money who hasn't been there long.
I agree, Grant. I think that was part of the discussion when we had our day-long session, that it wasn't an automatic given that we would concur with the additional 10,000. It's nice to see what it looks like in the budget, but I think that that is still under review, I think. That we need to see where the numbers fell before we would take another look at that.
Yeah, I would feel more comfortable going that, next year when we do the budget, to see if he's still here and he's got, his certificates.
And I know the park superintendent was something that would be agreeable if the budget would allow. So it too is under advisement, I believe.
Do we want to make a decision how to move forward on that, or still thinking about that?
Just so we know the timeline, we have one more meeting to make these final decisions.
This first reading, September, first meeting in September, correct? Yes. And then we have a break, and then the last two in October.
Well, I guess I would ask the council what they would be comfortable with, do line item voting tonight, or would take the next 2 weeks to think about it. Let the various committees give us some thought. Merge those thoughts by the next meeting.
I would prefer that, Eric, actually. Just to be able to digest the numbers, because we haven't had a lot of lead time to look at the renewed numbers just yet.
Did everybody get by email the new budget?
Just today.
Today.
Today, okay.
And if anyone needs a hard copy, let me know.
I would think you can, I was able to print one out, so. The budget book.
Okay, so if that's the decision for tonight, we'll just go ahead and everybody review this, come back to the next meeting, look over it again.
Yeah, I mean, we heard from the gentleman Reedy that, what, 60,
67.
67. Okay, I mean, it sounds like a professional opinion that we need to find $60,000 to cut here. So, I would think we should bear down and get that done. Do we want to do it individually? Do we want to assign a committee? You might want to report directly to the mayor on his thoughts. Just so we're coordinated.
So you're saying, Jerry, in 67, in order to have a balanced budget, it's not that we don't have the cash for it, it is to balance each fund, correct?
That's based off the general fund. Well, I'll tell you which ones it doesn't include. MVH restricted, LRS, and sanitation. All the other funds, that's the deficit. If you added all the surplus deficits together, that's where we're coming up with the $67,000 deficit. I mean, technically MVH restricted, I mean, that's a good example. That's not going to be a balanced budget for 2021, but you're not spending all of that money this year and spending it next year. So over the course of 2 years, it's balanced, but technically that's not a balanced budget for 2021. But sometimes that's the way projects work out. You're going to grow more cash in 1 year, spend down in the next. But yeah, the 67,000 doesn't include the MVH restricted, LRS, and sanitation.
Because we definitely know we're not going to spend that 237,000. Sure. You know, we're going to carry that forward.
But that's not a fund that we could transfer out of.
No, that was created a couple of years ago, where maybe 2000 started 2019, but you do have to receive 50% of your MVH distributions into that fund. It has to be used pretty much for paving projects. But really, everything that goes into that, you really want to spend it, especially if you have those projects. That was anticipated to be 100% spent this year, but since it's not, based off of the budget carrying over plus what's planned next year, you're going to spend that remaining cash in there on hand for this year, plus the 50% distribution that's going to be received in there next year.
Do you have the projections for next year on MVH?
On MVH,
Yeah.
Yes.
I just wondered if we were using.
We're using the hopefully very conservative projections by the state.
Conservative, okay.
Yeah, so, which it was, I think they were projecting roughly maybe 82% of 2020's distributions, which is a drastic decrease for you guys. Just to give you an idea. Distributions for this year are about, it's close to 600 grand, but the year before it was closer to 7. It's been going, because part of the distributions this year, COVID-19 is going to affect it as well, so they decreased as well the second half of this year. But then next year, the total is down to roughly 540,000. So another decrease, and that's why you see that larger deficit there in MBH, because for the time being, we didn't shift any property taxes from general over to the MBH fund. We just left it the way it is, and then we ultimately make that decision at the end once we gather all the budgets. So,
What's our concern with the 72 decision? Do we need to have this looking a certain way to satisfy the state?
Well, as long as there's enough, either the DLGF looks at an 18-month period. They'll look at the second half of this year and then all of next year when they go to approve your budgets. With MBH being a property tax fund, that is one that they will approve. And for example, if you did not have enough cash on hand plus projected revenues through the remainder of this second half of this year and then all of next year, they would just cut your budget. Now you're going to be fine there. You're even if you have enough cash on hand on that summary page, even if you spent down to 200 and some thousand, you would still have roughly 200,000 left in cash at the end of 2021. So they would still approve that budget. I wouldn't recommend adopting that budget and spending that amount of cash down. The DLGF, they'll approve it as long as there's enough cash in the fund and plus projected revenue to be able to fund the budget.
So if you could bottom line it for us, you think we have enough cash on hand to get it passed without more than 67 out, or do you think we need to do?
Oh, it would get approved. And honestly, 67,000. Like I said, with some of the conservative aspects that we built into the plan, I would have no problem with, I would want to move line items around within the funds right now, but collectively, no problem with the budget that you guys have currently. If you decide not to make any further cuts. Yes. And historically, like as far as based on what you guys typically spend of your budget, I really wouldn't see you guys even spend it down to 67,000. That would be if you spend 100% everything in the budget. Historically, you don't. And then also we have some revenue. We're really conservative in some revenue areas as well.
Would it be appropriate for the finance committee to be the group to take another pass through of this in consultation with the mayor before our next meeting, or provide a report?
I'm perfectly fine with that.
You're meeting together, finance committee and myself. And do you want Brady there, or you just want us to?
I think we got enough information tonight to make a decision.
So Jerry, you can feel very confident if we did not put anything else out there, that we would be okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, like I said, I want to shift some stuff around. MBH would have me worried and spending that amount of cash, but there's so much fund flexibility that we would be able to move stuff around. But yeah, we didn't make any more cuts. I feel comfortable with the budget that you have in place.
Changing those around, yeah, changing the line. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why don't we get a meeting together, keep the finance committee, myself, and Carol, see what we're doing. Did you do that, please? Thank you. Anybody have any other questions for them? Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Becky. Thanks for coming out, it's great. That's all I had under old business. I have nothing under new business. Does anyone else have anything? Okay.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, this is crazy, but I knew I saw Andy sitting there in the beginning. Then I looked over there, and that's not.
Yeah,